Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. I would like to speak about a very important question, a question that is on the minds of pretty much everyone on this planet. And the question is, does the universe? Excuse me. Does the universe have to make sense? That's the that's a very important question. It's a question that opens us to different approaches. Sometimes I write a sentence down and I conceptually break it down. I would say that before I get into the subtitle, in the mid of the episode, I want to get into the subtitle. But does the universe have to make sense? First, we have to be like, is the universe fully accessible to our sensory perception? That's a question that needs to be asked. Does the universe have to make sense? Is another component to the question is, who does it have to make sense to? Or what does it have to make sense to? Is that is the what a who, or is the who a what? I would say that does the universe have to make sense is a question that, if we look at existence before the concept of the universe, I mean, of course, here's the challenge. Because I've said the universe, the word uni means one. So the universe has to technically make sense as a concept, right? But does it have to make sense to us truly, as a truly real phenomena? In some sense, it's as if, what obligation does, let's say, human politicians have to take care of ants under a hill, The human species doesn't concern itself, for example, with the universe of an ant on a hill. So we can say that we could be the ant on the hill, and the universe doesn't make sense to us, or will never make sense to us, or it makes sense to the capacity that we can even see something. That means an anthill makes sense to an ant, but like the parliament or the White House doesn't make sense to like a species like the insect, the ant, right? So it has to do with reality entrance, and how much of the reality we have entered into is dynamic. That means it's changing before we can interpret it, or as we interpret it, it changes. And of course, this is a question, guys, that I would say every human being has wondered about it, not just limited to philosophers. I mean, philosophers were ahead of the game, but I would begin here by saying, before we wonder about if something can make sense, or has to make sense, or does make sense, first we gotta wonder about what is the universe. That is one of the biggest questions, and in some sense, very honorable and notable physicists are working towards discovering and advancing the outer realms and enhancing our perception of it. The concept of how something makes sense is an inner thing. That means it is more of a mind. That means, does the universe, till that point in the question, it's the outer realms, and then how have to make sense is more like in the inner realms, relevant, So I would say, in what ways has humanity understood the universe? And of course, I'm not a physicist, but I have a certain understanding of physics. In no way 100% accurate or ideal, but I will share with you that there is this concept that there was the Hubble telescope. The Hubble telescope noticed background radiation, and when it noticed background radiation, we began examining the eventhood of our universe through temperature change. And in some sense, the current theory is the Big Bang theory. And the Big Bang is a suggestion that the universe was an ocean, was a pool of potential. That means when some physicists say, for example, the universe started from nothing, that nothing is not nothing. That nothing is like a pool of potential where the smallest particles, or even from the approach of string theory, you could see it. It's as if particles are coming in and out of manifestation on a very subtle scale. Now, in the Big Bang, something interesting that many people don't know, that in less than a second, through cosmic inflation, the universe appeared. The Big Bang theory is strangely the explanation of an unknown causal event, right? Because that's the challenge as human beings. We find ourselves in a world of cause and effect. We look at the effects and we're like, what is the cause, And sometimes we wonder if the effect that we see is the cause of this moment rather than, long ago. I would say that existence is under no obligation to make sense. Existence is like, excuse me, I was here first. You think I need to explain myself? It's the human animal that needs an explanation. If the human animal didn't use language, there would be no reason to explain anything. Everything's just being itself. It's really the curiosity of a multidimensional entity that is making even the concept of evolution be relatable. So, does the universe make sense? Yes to the past, no to the present, and no to the future, because there is no universe in the way we see it. Right now, our relationship, at least all I have access to is like the archetypes of this lifetime, but at this moment in the space-time continuum. But I would tell you that there is ways that we have all been before we have done anything, and what that means is the person looks at their life and they're like, wait a minute, I was born on 1991. Before 1991, I had endless experience in not existing. I have 4.5 billion years 4 billion years of not existing as an idea. We have experience. It's just as from the beginning of the universe we have non-existential experience. Everybody can write in their resume, I have an Aeonian I have incredible amounts of experience in non-existence. As if we have not existed more than we have existed. That's the humorous thing. I would say that potential needs to have a reality to be accessed. When we say the Big Bang was a potential, it still doesn't explain who pushed the first domino, and if it's a who. If we personalize that question, most likely you end up as a religious person. If you impersonalize the question, you end up as a sort of, secular mind, alone in the void. Pretty much human beings have been imbuing objective reality with meaning. What that means is the Buddha noticed that objects are empty in nature, and if we call a teacup, it's not because the object has the concept of the teacup. When we see the object, the concept of the teacup activates in our mind, for example. Excuse me. You know, it's as if I'm taking a philosophical approach where I'm trying to question, find the ultimate question to the sentence. Does the universe have to make sense? That means the ultimate unknown component to it. And I would say through the secular understanding, the known component to it is that the universe makes as much sense as we are aware of it. Just like Friedrich Nietzsche says, if there was if a tree falls in a forest and nobody's there, did the tree fall? Similarly, if there is no attention to the universe, there is no universe to make sense. So the universe temporarily makes sense to us, and we're literally candles, and the moment we're born, there's the conscious mind of the human being being a sort of glow of the body's life. There's a diagram everybody pretty much should know. Anybody who's alive on this planet should know this diagram, or at least know what it's about. And guys, something that I've noticed that the New Age community, or you can say metaphysical communities, kind of dishonor about physical communities. What I mean about is that if a physics and a spiritual person got into an argument, the spiritual person should in some sense understand how the physicist is like a knight of the outer realms. And the physicist should understand the metaphysicist is the knight of the inner realms. When I say knight, I mean K-N-I-G-H-T. A knight has an honor. I mean, that's a very simplistic way of saying it. Knights cared for the kingdom, cared for the walls of the kingdom, cared for the eyes of the king, which was the knowledge of the time. And so, even though we as creatures, through evolution, an object became a subject to itself, this subject started making everything else into the world into a subject, then linked itself or established itself in a linguistic simulation in language, and now we're using language as a subject to wonder about how the object is creating the subject, or how objects lead to subjects. The Big Bang Theory is you could say one of the winning explanations of how an object becomes a subject, but it doesn't actually explain what causes the object to be aware of itself as a subject. What that means is, I mean, it explains what, but it doesn't explain how. What that means is like you can totally be like, you go to a soccer field and see a jersey on the ground of the soccer field, you know, and be like, okay, maybe somebody played soccer here, right? You could totally kind of make that claim. But we don't know why the jersey is there. So similarly, we can look at life, we can understand how it got here to a certain limit. I mean, it's a big statement to make a claim of like 15,000 million years ago. What were we? You see, if people look at the wallpaper of this video, you will see the universe. Or you will see at least the Big Bang Theory being a reverse engineering sort of route towards the causal position of worldhood. That means a philosopher would look at the Big Bang Theory and be like, this is an incredible work of reverse engineering. That means just from temperature, we figured it out. But really what it is that if I personally feel, if we were to look at, if we took Vedic science, and Vedic is not science in the same way as science today, but the Vedic sciences, or the Vedic methodologies back in the past, they had this approach of singularizing consciousness and the fragment of consciousness of the moment with the whole moment. So in the Vedic analogy, in yoga, we had the individual. Yoga means union, and so it's the union of the individual archetype, let's say the ego, and it's the union of the individual activity with the cosmic activity. And all those people who go to meditate, the moment they understand the inseparability of the individual and the cosmic activity, there is no meditator, there is no meditation. It's done. The work is done. That means you access the witness within, or the witness of how energy and attention are instantaneously being before time is a simulation. So in Vedanta, there's this notion that one moment is all moments. And so I find that if the atom, of course, it's being suggested 99.9% empty, but that's not a sort of kind of regular emptiness. I would say it's conditional emptiness, 99.9% of the atom being empty. But I would say if in ancient times they were like everything can be everything, or everything is being everything, the more we actually question and wonder about the dimension in our world, we will begin noticing the relationship of everything and nothing, and this is going to in some sense be a sort of edge of our psychology as human beings. The individual is like, the concept of the individual is like an Iron Man suit. The Iron Man suit can fly in the sky, but it cannot fly in outer space. That means if Superman was offended and was flying out of Earth, Tony Stark couldn't follow him to kind of be like, yo man, imagine having a conversation with Superman in the orbit. So what I'm trying to say is that in at least philosophy, or philosophically oriented ideas that are trying to wonder how the unknown is being known, the known is the unknown. This is the biggest mystical wisdom. That means mysticism is the opposite of, you could say, knowledge. Mysticism is how the person's wondering what would they know be prior to the identity that identified with everything known. So we look at it, let's say 15,000 million years ago, it was just, a certain level of simpler particles, and we go. And I think cosmic inflation is, where would it be? It would probably be the third wave, or I could be wrong. So anyways, we wonder about how to make sense of the universe. We check out the temperature of the universe. We theorize that there's a sort of relationship of how matter appears. Most likely, I feel what will happen is that human beings will understand that reality is art. And that's going to freak out the realists, And it's like right now, as I'm being an individual human being, a podcaster with the online alias Mr.Within, the same time all the cells in my body are being themselves. They're just being cells. That means on a cellular level, there is no individual. On the atomic level, there is no individual. If we go deeper, there is no individual. The individual is just like a phase. It's as if we've entered the cave and there's shade from the sun, and that shade inside the cave is like how the human individual idea is arising. It's a temporary positioning of attention, but the nature of attention can go beyond humanism, and that is one of the biggest challenges of our species in the inner realms. How are we going to, in the evolutionary phases of a creature, come into terms that the mind is not a jar of ideas, the mind, or a jar, or a film project, a neurochemical kind of jar of film projection or subject projection. The mind is a field, ladies and gentlemen. That means you cannot, anybody who says I have a mind, I would say that in the future they will say I am being a mind or I am being in my mind. You know, right now as I am speaking, I would say I am in the Iron Man suit of the ego. And of course, guys, this question, because the universe is so big and we're so small, obviously the answer is that the universe doesn't have to make sense to us. That means it's impossible. That means it's as if even if we could, you know, even if we had the best approach, we could not index the whole universe to come up with an accurate average of a law, right? So that means the world is so big and we're so small that whatever laws we're considering, of course they're evident in regards to an empirical experimentation. What I mean by that is, like, there's certain things in the outer realms that don't change, you know, or change slower than the mind, or if you want to consider everything in the universe changes. You know what that means is, it's like if your mind goes faster than your body, you become an individual. If your body goes faster than your mind, you become a collective. We have reached a point where it's not possible for our bodies to, in some sense, and this is a modality, it's not like this is an absolutist metaphor. You know, I'm saying, like, or an absolutist analogy. What I'm saying is, like, the speed of intelligence will suggest how intelligence finds itself in the moment. And it's also expression based. Many people don't understand this, but there is no such thing as learning. It's more like the Transformers movie, where the Transformers was like a shitty car and then saw a better car and was like, yo, you know, I'm gonna be this car. That transformation means that deep down within every human being's psychology is a zero level witness. What that means is, we thought this whole time on the planet we are like a natural number set embodied. A natural number set starts from 1, 2, 3, 4 onwards, you know. You know, but a whole number set starts with 0, and many people don't know this. The concept of 1 predates the concept of 0, the number. That means we found number 1, and then somebody was like, yo man, what if there was no number? And then, like, the 0 came about, you know. And I believe it was India, believe it or not, it was Indian mathematicians who I feel discovered a symbol for absence. It's as if somebody's like, can you show me nothing? And you draw like the number 0 on, like, on a piece of paper. We're all moments. That's the safest way to engage it, you know. There is no good and bad people. There's just efficient and inefficient moments when it comes to collective vision. A natural set attributed to the ego will mean that the beginning of life has a singular source. Most religious people, and this is one thing I would say, that for example, the religious community and the secular scientific community have in common. They have actually philosophically one thing in common. That for them, the universe's ignition was the spark of the universe was singular. That means nobody says there was like thousands of big bangs happening simultaneously. We say there was one big bang. Nobody says there's thousands of gods, simultaneously creating the world. We say there's one God in the world. You see, there's a sort of singularity. To me, believe it or not, of course, science is a method and religion is a belief system. Religion is a story. Science is like something you can do in this story. You see, the era of the multidimensional is upon us. There is no longer, I declared this after the year 2020, that the era of advanced communication has begun. That we are, in some sense, no longer have to be a single object and a single subject. And it's impossible to be a single subject, by the way, because every day you wake up, you're kind of new, like a new self. I don't even know how people on this planet have been believing and disbelieving things. To me, it's both a show, right? Because every moment we wake up, every day we wake up, we say it's a new day. And if we have the concept of novelty, how can the past have the final say? That means in the future, imagine there will be some people, they will be called noveltists, And these noveltists, their whole philosophy is that they don't care about anything. The only thing that exists is the new. Can you imagine a philosophical system where it's as if anything in the past, we were brave enough to be like, thank you, dear ancestors, but the future deserves to fly now rather than walk. It's a big question. Sometimes in these philosophical talks, like I don't mention it or I don't try to communicate it, but there are moments where I get emotional, where I get emotional in a sort of, I don't want to say pity, I don't want to say it's human pity, but sometimes it's like an ant that has realized giants are walking around it, and it's as if, why am I piloting as an object now? That question, it has I shouldn't say it has broken my heart, it has destroyed myself. There's some questions in philosophy. This is why young kids, they don't really need to care about philosophy, because eventually at the end of your life you will. Anybody who in some sense doesn't understand philosophy, I will tell you, the way the system is designed, as the candle melts, as the candle gets closer to melting, it will be like, what am I? What am I? What is this glow? As if a sort of thunder strike is heard, in a dark, rainy night, The psychology is not us. If our psychology was us, life should have been a photograph. If we were our mind, life should have never changed. It's as if we are acting like, this is what I don't like about the educational system in 2021. It's teaching children nouns, but the world is a verb. It's teaching people are treating truth as if it's like one image. It's like, yeah, put this poster on your wall and you have truth always. Impossible. This life has dimensions that language has not yet contained. We are as if like the children of the gods that have just for a moment glimpsed heaven, And after 4.5 million years, we notice that we can notice ourselves. Isn't that incredible? Sometimes when I get stressed out in life, I'm like, did I evolve 4.5 billion years? To just suffer? Like, there's no way that's the aim of life, The aim of life is to utilize the experiential access. I would say life is not a concept, so does the universe have to mean... does the universe have to make sense? Is in some sense is a question that is after experience. Direct experience cannot question itself. It's just instantaneously experiencing something. Like right now, I'm looking at my laptop as I'm giving this talk. I cannot be like, this laptop isn't here. Why? Because I'm seeing it. I have direct experiential access. Now, there are moments where the person may close their eyes. I could close my eyes right now and still visualize my laptop in front of me on the table, right? Now, the only difference is that in that inner realm, it's the experience is way different. That means in these talks, I tell people that the inner realms has that means if you look at an object, like any object in front of your eyes, people can do this as as an exercise right now. Just look at any object. You'll notice it has shape. You'll notice it has color. You'll notice there is space and depth of dimension between you and the object, but you will also notice that you can touch the object as another object. But when we close our eyes and visualize a coffee cup and try to hold that coffee cup, it's not an object touching an object. It's actually an invisible viewer, and the visibility can be as real as it animates itself. That means if you want to experience your imagination in the same way that cyberspace in the future will make us experience our will allow us to step into our imaginations, you have to be the associative self of that realm. That means if I'm let's say in my inner realms, I close my eyes and I just envision a geometrical universe. A universe where every being, they look humanoid, but they're all geometry. There is no skin, there is no face, there is depth in 3 dimensions, but let's say it's all just pure geometry. So if you found yourself behind your eyes in a geometrical universe, you don't move in that geometrical universe as an idea of a human being. You move in that geometrical universe as a geometrical shape. Right now we're in a human universe, we move in it as we pilot as a human being. If our attention goes to something else, we pilot differently. Sorry guys, I just spilled water here, hold on. I just created an ocean on my table. So, to the inner life, the universe can make any sort of sensory combination. And we can even make the claim that if our eyes are seeing stuff, and if our eyes are 1/5 of our perception, that means it's kind of saying like there's one world made of 5 senses, or every sense is accessing its own world. This is for me a mystery where I sometimes wonder, okay, is the brain having like 5 different rooms which it has private access to, or are all these 5 rooms being the same in the same house? As if like I'm a person and I got this sense and that sense, and I can smell, touch, and taste things. You know what I mean? So it becomes something where it's like, are those separate in their own dimension, or are they not? And really, it comes to geometry. The only thing that can answer this question, does the universe have to make sense, is that, to be honest, just as a re-emphasis, in the inner realms, it can mean anything. In the outer realms, we are like a passenger. Sometimes when like right now, I'm giving this talk in my conscious waking state. I'm not giving a talk in my dream state, but like, so in this conscious waking state, it's as if I didn't think of the world. The world is like a thought that it was thought before I was born. Being alive on Earth is equivalent to finding yourself as a character in some unknown mind. Now, Vedic approach was that we're all being God's dream. So the idea is, if reality is multidimensional, there's no way the world is going to make sense when there's multiple dimensions, because each dimension can have a view on all the dimensions or individual dimensions. So the more multidimensional we become, the less we're seeking noun-like meaning and more building a civilization that is like just momentum, conscious momentum, that holds conscious momentum. You know, there is a point. I'll tell you this interesting idea. Sorry, not interesting idea. Interesting story. This story is so important in regards to its value, just its moral. All right. So I hope people hear the moral of the story. Pretty much, there was this guy, this Zen monk. He went to this grassland, this just nice, pleasant field. He sat in there, and as he was sitting there, kind of closing his eyes, meditating in this grass field back in the day, right, he suddenly understands something about the nature of reality. They call it self-realization, as if truth is in the room and we're greeting it for the first time or noticing it. So he notices a deeper dimensions to his world, and as this is an old Zen story. So what happens is there's a minion in another dimension, a dark minion, an evil minion, and this minion sees that this Zen monk just got enlightened and understood more about the nature of true reality, and this minion runs to the Dark Lord and says, Dark Lord, this human being understood, this human being is figuring out that it's a simulation. And the Dark Lord says, don't worry, the minion says, what should we do? He's understanding more of the truth. So the Dark Minion says this to the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord looks at the Dark Minion and says, don't worry about it. And this is the moral of the story. The Dark Lord says, human beings, the moment they experience something new, they identify with it, they attach themselves with it, and he will make a belief out of it, the Dark Lord says. So the Dark Lord says, don't worry, human beings, even if they access greater dimensions, because they haven't conquered the ignorance in a singular dimension, that ignorance most likely will echo in other dimensions. That means it's like right now I could say when I'm giving this talk, my attention is being piloted from the inner realms. But imagine if I was on a bicycle giving this talk, if I was riding a bicycle and at the same time giving a talk, it would be as if the inner realms will take my attention from my outer realms, and the outer realms will take more of my attention of the inner realms, and so the podcast will be shakier at a different speed. The human effort is to go beyond whatever we know, or we'll get bored and eventually do so. That means beliefs are like pictures we've seen in a photo album. The human mind should just engage a global exploration effort. So, guys, of course, this is a public live stream, so people are free to share anything, in the chat section. But just keep in mind, my grandkids in the future might see this. Like the chat section of the anyways. The universe doesn't have to make sense to a subjective individual that changes all the time its individuality. We are a growing creature, yet we judge ourselves based on the past. Makes no sense, We are creatures. It's as if the mind creates the concept of time, and then we wonder if our mind is in time, and we can't know. So I would say when it comes to does the universe have to make sense, everything that makes sense to us is inside time. Pretty much the only way something makes sense is if we figure out what its context is and how the context is leading to the concept and how the concept is leading to the context. If there's an inner dimension, the concept is leading to the context. If there's an outer dimension, the context is leading to the concept. Either the universe is moving the human being or the human being is moving the universe. If the universe has to make sense, that means if it has to make sense to the human being has to move the universe. What that means is only free will can answer. Only free will can answer this question: does the universe have to make sense? For the free will, it can. You see, it doesn't have to, but it can. It's like an option. It's an option. You could look at this world and be like, I'm looking at nothing right now. Or you could be looking at the world and be like, oh my God, everything is its meaning. It's as if somebody was like, does the color blue mean anything, Mr. Within? And I'll be like, yeah, it means it's blue. There is no, its initial existence doesn't have additional dimensions for it to change. Right? We don't look at an object, like nobody goes to, like, let's say an object, let's say to their table, and they're like, oh man, this table, has so much life experience. The table is inanimate. There is no additional dimension of mind for it to document any sort of progression in the space-time continuum. But our intelligence allows us to document. It's as if conscious experience is documentation. And so we look at these documents and we're like, what are we looking at? The person remembers their earliest memory and they're like, what am I looking at right now? Free will is an opportunity. This opportunity allows us to impose a subjective overlay of meaning into any object. This is why people can like and dislike someone in an instant. Like, I've literally witnessed that in these talks I give. There's moments where I look at the viewer count and it's like the viewer count, like I remember one episode it was like 10 and I was like, no way, 10 minds in the world are listening to this. Then suddenly it dropped to 2 and I was like, oh my God. So it's as if right now it's an artificial level of social living, right? We don't even have a human honor right now. That means if robots started hurting people, how many human beings do you think in society will defend human beings? If an alien, let's say there was an alien invasion and a human being was in trouble in the human species, how many people would be like, nobody touches my family? Like, how many people would have that attitude towards the aliens? You know what I mean? The universe, by definition, has to make sense so we know what the concept of the universe is. But I'm saying it's also optional. That means we have access to the universe that our senses create as our mind happens as them. That means even though right now I can say I'm a human being speaking, but I am actually just being energy. Do you see what I mean? Like, any moment we can have an instant recognition how everything is being at once, but if you fragment it through time, then character and storytelling begins. That means the most important question that any novelist or any storyteller pretty much, like, there's different approaches. Like, I have a twin brother and he's an incredible, I would say, novelist, and I would say his approach, like, I write science fiction, he writes science fiction as well, and his approach is different. He starts off by creating the universe in his novels first, you know, then in some sense like the characters in it, right? My approach is different, where I see different types of characters from, let's say, a meaningless context, and then I make the universe around the characters, you know. So people are different, of course. I mean, the mind is, of course, nobody has the same DNA, you know. The educational system is like a certain sized doorway, and 8 billion human beings with different sizes of intelligence are trying to enter it. So in the chat section, Valerie says people have the attention span of a goldfish. You know, some goldfish may be offended right now. But I'll be like, honestly, yeah, it is true. But it's not that they have, I would say, a small attention span. It's that we have been conditioned in zooming in rather than zooming out. Because anytime you zoom out, you automatically get access to an environment. So I'll give you an example. Imagine you're, you know, you drop your phone and, you know, on the ground. So you bend to get the phone, and suddenly you don't see the ceiling of the house, let's say you're in, okay? So you go to grab your phone from the ground, and the access to the ceiling is gone, you know, seeing the ceiling. How would I say it? I'm trying to say, like, if your head's in a box, you only see like the small, you know, area of the box. If you take your head out of the box, instantly you access the greater room. So the knowledge is like actually like touring a cosmic museum and entering different rooms of it, really. I think that's a great analogy. Knowledge is an infinite museum, and understanding is like the room of knowledge we're walking in at that moment, what we're seeing in that room. And here's the hilarious thing: if we did understand the whole universe, there would be no we would be an intelligence as the same size as the universe, right? I would say that my when I was younger, it was very easy for me to see weakness in people, because the moment you see weakness in yourself, you identify with it, you know, especially if young people listening, you know, there will be many ways life communicates to the individual, and the individual has to choose what they take away from the moment. You know, that means imagine somebody said for 10 minutes, you know, you're going to be in an argument, right? And then never again that argument's going to happen, and the same argument's going to happen in the space-time continuum. So in that 10 minutes, the person aims for the most incredible opportunity of a let's say, discussion or whatever. And we can't ignore how the human psychology can't exist in 100% known universe. It'll drive us insane. It'll literally render the meaning of life void. You know, it would be an inner extinction if everything was known, right? And to say that if the universe has to make sense, that's kind of like saying everything has to be known. It's as if, like, you know, there was a scene in one of the Indiana Jones movies where, like, this like, you know, bad lady kind of in the show. Like, there's a scene where this woman goes towards finding truth. She's like the antagonist in the story, and that she gets access to the truth, but these aliens, the moment they share the truth with her, her eyes can't contain it. Do you know? It's as if we are not a strong enough storage unit to hold like that level of cosmic information. This is why you can't know the universe as an individual, but collectively you can be it. I could even share it in this way, where I could say, there may be good or bad human beings, but humanity is not good or bad. It is the sum total of all the effort of the geometrical shape of the human being. Because really, what the human being is a shape, guys. You know, knowledge is, you're studying shape. Pretty much, knowledge is geometry, but linked with subjective realism, reality. So what that means is I'm like existing in a direct experiential world, and as I perceive the direct experiential world, it's as if the light enters my eyes and reflects back as a second consideration, as a new moment of awareness. So the idea is that a human being should try to not find truth, but try to be true, be true to their simplest moment of being. Like, I'll tell you guys, there is no other thing in even meditation. It ultimately comes down to this. Like, I have no idea what spiritual people are doing on the planet if it has nothing to do with trying to see why the mind is active, right? As if it's a film, you find yourself a character in the middle of a film, and you're like, why am I being an actor in this film? Who's directing the film, right? And imagine you stop being an actor and you realize you are the director. When I say you are the director, this means free will is a privilege. Sometimes I look at chaos and I'm like, is chaos artwork? Sometimes I look at order and I'm like, wait a minute, is order artwork? Like, is chaos and order just like kind of the artist never stopping to draw with two angles of the brush movement? The universe is even being whatever way of attitude we generate towards it, right? That means if somebody wakes up and they feel like they've already lived a good day before the day has started, it's as if everything of the karma of the day goes smoothly. It's as if the person wakes up in a world and it's like, okay, let me get this straight. So I have a certain amount of time before I automatically go back into the unconscious, It's as if like being a tourist to another country and then in the day exploring that country, but at night sleeping in a hotel. You know what I mean? It's as if we go back into the unconscious at night, and then the next day we wake up and we're like, all right, let's see what this world has to offer or to show. It's as if people don't realize people pay for movies, and that's understandable due to technology's allure. But but the world is a movie. It's a free movie, The person's like, I wish I could be in that movie. Guess what? You are in one. Existence is like the best movie that a mind can see so far, or the inner witness can. The poet Rumi says, your task is not to seek love, but to get rid of all the barriers you have made against it. The task of the human being is not to assume there has to be a truth to things, but to assume there is no truth and reduce the percentage of untruth as we go into the future, right? That means imagine people being like, man, I believe this, and imagine in the future people are going to be like, yo man, I disbelieve my disbelief. It's like game over. That means it's like it means language games. We're living in an era where like actually nobody can see each other's real self. It's impossible. to truly see. That means, like, right now as I'm giving this talk, the audience can till the end of time try to see who I am behind my eyes when I give these talks, but there's no way. There's no way. And it's the same for everyone. If I try to try to understand another person the way nature is designed, it's impossible, because we don't have access to the inner space of the pilot of the other person's free will, right? Maybe in cyberspace we will. Cyberspace is going to be one of the, you know what I believe? I believe a lot of philosophers are going to advocate cyberspace. Why? Because it's when our greatest philosophical questions can actually be lived in, right? Imagine writing a question on a piece of paper, then imagine creating a cyberspace world that represents that question, and you're going inside that question literally in the same sense of like entering the world, you know? You know, cyberspace is a portal where we access the portal from behind our eyes. That means, imagine if there was a portal that appeared out of nowhere, and when you entered this portal, you would be in the future, right? So imagine cyberspace being able to project future probabilities of reality, and us having the capacity to go live in it, right? Like right now, I don't know how fast technology is going to improve, but I feel that cyberspace is going to allow us to experience ourselves as gods of the sensory. So what that means is our free will act as its ultimate creator, not just the creator, because right now we are an individual in a world. We kind of like, just as Alan Watts says, a tree apples the planet people. You know, nature is simply in a simple way of looking at life. Nothing has to be anything. Like, nature is already being its own thing. The word blue doesn't need to have a philosophy on what blue is. Blue is blue. You know, the color blue is the color blue. There is no explanation needed. But anything that needs an explanation is in some sense an echo of a direct experience. And I'll say something about the inner realms, guys. It is too easy to have the inner realms declare truth. That means it's as if, like, one thing I haven't yet seen scientists, the scientific vision kind of challenge the philosophical vision in, is in some sense why the idea of self has to be associated with anything of the material, right? We can have this total view. You know what it is? It's as if both the theist and the atheist are right, you know? But they're right about different parts of a multidimensional system. As if somebody looks at a car and says, you know, imagine there's let's say, a car and someone's in it, and we're all looking from the outside of that car, right? And so somebody says the car is made of metal, the car is not alive, the car is not intelligent, the car is just like a universe of atoms, the metal, the dimension of the car. And so that person is not wrong. And imagine now the theist being like, no, there's a driver in the car. The car is moving because there is a driver. That driver has a destination. That destination suggests a more intelligent activity than just atoms having no personality. But you see, they're both right, but they're looking at different dimensions of the same moment. And the true humanity is a complete union with the world, as if the person's like, all right, for how long am I going to experience karma? Like, it gets boring, guys. You know, that means I'm telling you, we have to either start new games or the world will bore itself to extinction. You know, that's the most embarrassing thing. You know, if extraterrestrials in the future land and we have the most boring civilization, the extraterrestrials are like, you creatures call yourself creative. You know, it's like your whole civilization looks like a bunch of rectangles. You know, you know, it's as if the extraterrestrials will be like, their technologies did not surpass next level architecture. You know, imagine in the future there's a law passed that no building has to look like a platonic solid. It's illegal for architects to create buildings that are not like works of art. And civilization will flip like a pancake till the end of time. You know, what is right now will be wrong in the future. In like, let's say 100 years, then in the next 100 years it's going to be correct, then wrong, then right, then wrong. You know, it's just kind of like endless. That means there is no truth to concepts. Nobody can judge an idea because nobody knows from what dimension of time that, in time, that idea can be judged to be valid. So, let me see what else I can say. Where does reality stand? Where is it all happening? Is the world happening inside our brain? You know, is the world how our brain is happening? Or is the world happening in a way where if we can somehow notice beyond the movement of the visible body, it's as if we use whatever we can. It's as if there is no truth or untruth. You know, it's like there's just geometry of ideology, and we're like a species cast away on a galactic island. It's like immediately we have to create a sort of survival of the whole species with strategy, right? That means imagine 8 billion human beings were stranded on an island in empty space, in the unknown waters of empty space. So the first thing is food, shelter, temperature, you know, physiological survival. That is one of the most honorable things a human being can do on this earth, is to serve is to serve the body of mankind, the body of civilization. And then there is serving the mind of civilization. And in serving the mind of civilization, probably at the fringes of that paradigm, non-humanism is going to become as normal as humanism. Right now, if we see something that's not human, we're like, oh my God, what is that? You know, you know. But in the future, when they see something that surpasses the human archetype, immediately, like, advanced communicators are called to the scene. Because we have, honestly, one lifetime to express. I mean, this biological body, I know that in, like, at some point in the space-time continuum, it's going to tap out, you know. And so before the temporary engages our direct experience totally, we as human beings must not just notice what's going on here, right? And we should realize that it's, believe it or not, for the first time someone is saying in history, understanding is your own responsibility. That means the inner life should not be piloted by others, should be piloted by the self. So I want to see 8 billion pilots rather than an ideological system making like 1 billion people be a passenger of the same archetype. It's like, great, You know, I think the best way to see archetypes is that they are character traits in a plane of existence. If Carl Jung was alive right now, I'd probably attempt to write a book with him about how archetypes are vehicles, and they're vehicles for the collective unconscious. You know, it's like that scene, you know, from Game of Thrones where that, like, you know, magic lady says, uh, that sorcerer says, like, you know nothing, Jon Snow. And it's like, you know, I was thinking Jon Snow's like, you know, what can I do to get some respect around here? The unknown, the moment it is not feared, the true scholarly inspiration arises. As long as we fear anything, we just stay away from it. If right now a person fears the unknown, right, they're just going to lock themselves in a belief system. You know, it's as if people now are like, they don't like the lockdowns, right? And guess what? You know how many people are locked down in ideologies? It's ridiculous. Sometimes I think it's like, is there really a human being here, or is it just a theatrics of language? You know, or you know, it's like sometimes I hope the illusion is being watched by the truth. You know, sometimes you can hope for continuity transcendental. And you know what's even more mind-boggling, guys? Imagine if we didn't become conscious. Just for a second, take in this idea that there was no subjective evolution, as I say in these talks. So if there was no subjective evolution, our biology might have completely changed, right? Like the only reason we find the biological human body slowly evolving is because we declare individualism as the most important thing, but don't realize that individualism disconnects us from nature. So it's kind of like, this is the way we should pilot on Earth, where in the outer realms we communicate as individuals, but in our inner realms we are the whole moment. You know, it's as if human beings, they all share communication. Our communication is geometry, very advanced, high quality geometry being input into the system. In the movie Matrix, that person behind the computer screen would see people as code. And I would say right now it's kind of like that, but the code is language. So it's literally sentence structure that is holding the identity. This is why many poets were liberated souls. Why? Because in their wonder and fascination and absence of fear of the unknown, they got to see how the sensory can be perceived differently. Every time I give these talks, it's like, because the world has changed, I have to start over. You know, start over and talking about the world. I would say reality stands in the presence of our attention. And the universe makes sense to the degree that we're aware of our senses. And if we're aware of our senses, we are not our senses only, because it's impossible. It's like, imagine like the concept of gold becoming alive. And so it would notice itself like being gold, like it's like what you are, you can't observe. That's the whole point of direct experience. What you are not, you can observe, right? So it's as if directly the truth of life is not an individual, it's not a concept. But indirectly, life can have any meaning, any story. We weave reality in some sense, evidently abides by. You know, that means people's personalities are just the stories they tell themselves. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful, and namaste.